Hello, welcome to the stream. If you have any questions about what I'm doing or anything like that, feel free to just post in the chat and I will try to answer any questions either about Amulet or the development that I'm doing. So, other than that, I probably won't be talking much except to explain problems if that is something that people are interested in about hearing about.
Got a little Swedish there.
So yeah, so just kind of explain what I was working on since chunk serialization doesn't really lend itself to actual like detail. Uh, when you make a change in Amulet, we're gonna save the old chunk to disk, and that allows us to then, if you delete a chunk, you can undo it, which was actually brought up to us by QMagnet, who's currently making Diversity 3. He notified us that if you delete a chunk in MCEdit or MCEdit Unified, that change is not backed up and it's irreversible. And we've known that for a while, just because the way MCEdit handled chunks is it just deleted them from disk the moment you accidentally the moment you deleted a chunk. But looking back on that, we couldn't really fix it because I was built heavily into the system of just how worlds worked in MCEdit. Is that if a chunk didn't exist, this it relied on if a chunk existed for it to exist on disk, and if it was not there to not exist on disk. So if you deleted a chunk, the MCEdits or PyMC level had to physically delete it from the disk, or else it would then break, or else the chunk would still exist after you deleted it, which is kind of goes against the purpose of deleting it. So what I want to implement in Amulet is something where you can undo and redo, because uh, that then allows mistakes to be made and for you to be able to fix them without irreversibly damaging your worlds without a backup. So, but so we have to save each change to disk. So when you undo it, if you delete a chunk, technically that chunk and all the changes you've made to that chunk throughout your editing session is saved, and you can restore that and go back as much as you want. But the problem with that is that we were doing 3 writes to disk for each chunk object. So we were writing blocks to one file, entities to another, and tile entities to a third. And there's a problem with that, is that that's 3 disk writes. And writing to disk and reading from disk are kind of slower operations if you don't have a SSD, which I don't have in this computer, and the running time for the tests was into the 2-second range, which is fine because most of all the tests now for all operations for filling and cloning and for deleting chunk now, those are the 3 main operations we have mostly implemented, all have undo and redo checks. So you do the fill operation, we undo it, we test to see if it matches the original state that it was, and then we redo it and recheck to make sure that it was in the changed state. So that means each test was doing roughly uh, 12 disk actions per uh, per test run. So now I made it so we, instead of serializing each part of the chunk at to separate files, we do it all in one big go. We just do the entire object as one, which reduces each chunk saving to disk and reading from disk down to 1 each. So those same tests now only have 2 writes, 2 disk operations per test run, which, or 3, I think, yeah, 3, which makes it just a lot easier on the disk. If you have a slower disk or kind of an older computer, it will go faster, which is obviously what we want in the end, is for this to not only just be an improvement, but also be slightly more performant. And so that's what I wanted to kind of accomplish with this. So right now I'm just going to check to make sure that the files are created in the structure I want them, because I don't want the file, right now the files use a kind of work directory in the world, but with these changes I've been making, I want to make sure that these uh, those changes are actually being saved to disk the way I want it to be. So this world is the 1.3 world. So we have temp. So each index is a change. So index 0 for changes is always the original state. Whenever you load a world, 0 always hold all the original copies. So if you access a block in chunk 0, 0, it will get added to 0. You make some changes in chunk 0, 0, and then you want to load chunk 5, 5. The original state of chunk 5, 5 will go back and get added to that change state 0, even if you haven't made any changes to it. That's just so when undoing everything, when we hit the last change, everything should be the way it was when it was loaded in. There should be no miscellaneous changes. So right now, it's going great. If you can look in these little things. Also, I forgot to mention this. If you are watching the stream and you can't really see the text too well, let me know. I noticed that on my stream last time that you couldn't really read the text, so you couldn't even really see what I was doing. But if you can someone just leave a comment in the stream chat so I can figure out how, like, what I need to change in that. So far so good. Now I'm going to make a few more changes so we're not creating this extra directory here. So that directory is for each chunk is its own directory, but now since each chunk is its own file instead of its own 3 files, I'm going to remove that just so we don't have to worry about any like extra disk operations. That's the main goal, is reduce all the disk operations. Because the more we can reduce, the more performance we'll have in the long run. So I'll delete that temp directory. Okay. So hopefully this doesn't break anything. All right. So we'll resynchronize this. Okay, good. So it's saved like that now. So I'm gonna probably change that delimiter, because right now that 0 equals 0 that's just a delimiter, so when we read it, we know which file, we don't accidentally get duplicate names. The first one is the chunk x coordinate, and then the equal sign just is the delimiter, and then the second value is the chunk z coordinate. So yeah, I'm just gonna do a little bit of I guess you could say research. Actually, this may not be as hard as I need it to be, because I can't use, I guess I could use negative signs, but I want to try to leave it as, I guess, not outsider friendly, but human readable as possible. So that means I don't want to have it be like a dash in the middle, because then if you have a negative chunks and negative coordinates, so that's -1 dash -1, which could work if explained, but I want you to be, I want to try it, so if someone who doesn't know anything about how Amulet works, but is told where their changes are stored and how to kind of like save all their previous change states into a different folder, so if they accidentally mess up and close the editor, that they can just pop that folder back in, reload, and have it all good to go. I want them to be able to look at it and be able to kind of figure it out for themselves, because we don't want Amulet to be something that's very ambiguous, something that you can't really tell what's going on, but we also don't want to make it super super intimidating for those who want to learn how it works, because MCA didn't have that problem, at least to me, but it's very hard when a lot of things is hidden to bring in new people to get their perspectives on it, because they have to learn it. And when you teach someone, or when you kind of have to explain code to somebody, you kind of explain in a way that how it made sense to you when you wrote it, which works. But then if they then understand it in the way you understood it, you can't really improve your code base over time. Those thoughts, that way of thinking, kind of traverses each person, unless they kind of just immediately come and say, no, that's not how anything works. So it looks like everything's passing. Oh, two tests failed? No. Okay, yeah, they're all passing. So now it takes about 0.125 seconds for one test and 132 seconds for another, and zero point 0.04 for another one, and I had that at kind of a generous half a second for that. That's for running the operation, undoing and redoing. So I'm actually going to go back to those tests, and I'm going to bring that down a bit. Not super crazy. I originally had it at a quarter of a second, and I think now that I've reduced just the runtime of everything, yeah, so it still passes. Obviously, this is just one test, but I think if you can make a change, undo it, and redo it all in a quarter of a second, which is really hard to, I think, do human-wise, then that's fast enough. And if it doesn't hit it, we can tweak it from there. So I'm actually going to commit this now. So now I'm just running our code formatter. It helps kind of keep a consistent look through all of our code, despite different people working on it, since each of us kind of have our own style we like to. So yeah. So this is a temp folder in one of these worlds, but it's not. The version control system doesn't really like how we do temporary files, but we'll be changing that location later anyway. So it's not really a big matter for us. And I'm just gonna clean up if we have any imports that we no longer need. That's not really super important now that the tests are running pretty fast, but I wanted to. It's always a good way to check, just in case you're having extra. You're adding extra commits or imports that you don't need, which is never a good thing. So. I don't need that. Miscellaneous utils. I don't need that. Okay, so we're good to go on that. So now I'm gonna go to our repository where hopefully the tests we have an online continuous integration testing service that we use. Hopefully that means all the tests have passed and we're good. So that was a success. So that means it, because when it's on a computer, it's depending on what applications are running and everything that's going on with the computer, you sometimes the tests are faster or slower, just depending on that kind of small segment of time, how much the computer was being used, or all of that. So I'm hoping that with the server, the server we use Circle CI, that if it runs in the time I would like it to on the server, then it will that's kind of like a good double check, since I don't have an array of computers to run this on. So just double checking, because it also gives us a graph of all the test run times throughout, so I'm going to see if that was an improvement over previous. Oops. Okay, I've noticed the stream's still a little blurry. I'm going to see what I can do about that. That's a little better. All right. So yeah, now both chunks can be deleted, edited, changed, reverted, and reverted as much as you like, and everything kind of just works. So that's going to be it for today, just because I kind of am a little tired, and hopefully in the next few days, when this branch is merged into our Talentity branch, I can then kind of stream a little bit of kind of merging these two changes together, the chunk changes, and then kind of reflecting that into how entities currently works. So, I'd like to thank everyone who came out for the stream. And if there's anything I can do to improve, just feel free to send me a message on Twitter or just contact me through that, and I'll try my best to improve how I do streams through this kind of cycle. So, yeah, thank you again for everyone who came out, and I'll see you in the next one.